Welcome back to Fun on Weekdays podcast, everyone. My name's Jenna. I'm your host, and today I am literally so honored. It's actually insane to be joined by Dan Reich, who is the founder of Tula and also just an incredible person that I've had the privilege to meet in this past year of working with Dibs. And so today we're going to be talking all about his history in entrepreneurship, how he started Tula and eventually sold it last year around this time to Procter & Gamble, and how he is now involved in other beauty brands like Dibs as an investor. So everyone, welcome Dan Reich.
Great to see you. Welcome to New York.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Although I will say it's pretty cold outside, but I don't know if every single building here jacks up the heat inside to make up for it, because it's like 85 degrees everywhere.
Yeah, I run around just holding my jacket in my hand.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
At that point, it's like I didn't even need this like long leather coat that I brought.
Well, it's great to see you.
Great to see you
you've
too.
done a lot with the Dibs team so far, and that's just beginning. And I'm sure we'll touch on it, but it's great to see you in person.
Yeah, of course. So you guys, I met Dibs. I met Dan about, was it 2 months ago now?
Yeah, probably. Dallas.
Yeah.
Dibs event.
Yes. So I met Dan in Dallas 2 months ago. They were doing an event there, and it was after the event. We're sitting around drinking margaritas in the hotel lobby and just having this like really long talk about his whole kind of experience growing up and how he got to where he is currently. And at the time, I was just feeling so lost. I actually had no direction in what I wanted to do. And I'm sure if you're a long-term listener of this podcast, like you have seen that. And lately I've had this weird sense of motivation. I don't really know where it came from, but I left our conversation feeling like, wow, I'm like really motivated and I feel like I can do literally anything if I actually just like go full force at it. So I wanted to share part of that conversation that we had together, starting by kind of your upbringing and where you grew up, all of those things, if you've always been super into businesses.
Yeah, sure. Well, first I'll say like, and I'm the eternal optimist, but I actually do believe anybody can do anything. It's just, we've been trained in life and built on these societal treadmills to think you go to school, you get good grades, you graduate, you get a good job, you get a promotion, you fast forward 40 years, 50 years later, and it's like, what have I done? And so I think if you realize that and you are conscious about it, you could hit eject off the treadmill like you have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when life gets real fun, because then you kind of take everything on your own and you go attack the world, and it's way more exciting. And so, yeah, like for me, I just was really fortunate to experience that at a young age. So I've been building businesses and doing the startup thing or entrepreneur thing my whole life. Like in high school, I was collecting baseball cards and selling them on my sidewalk to my neighbors. And then I graduated from that and would buy bouncy balls on eBay and would sell them wholesale in high school out of my locker. Which I ended up getting suspended for, because next thing you know, there's bouncy balls flying all over. It was like chaos. And then the first real business I started was also in high school. I would go online and buy urban apparel wholesale, like Rockwear, Sean John jeans, apple bottom jeans, and I would sell them online. So I'd get up in the morning at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd turn on Yahoo ads and Google ads, and I'd get that running. And during the day while I was at school, my customer support and service team would take all of the orders. And by customer support and service, I mean my mom.
I was going to say, I don't think Amazon was like as big at this point, the drop shipping world.
No. Like I went to the bank, I created a business, I opened a bank account. They gave me like a physical credit card processing machine, and I set it up in a room in my house. And so I'd go to school, my mom would go to the office, and she'd sit and check emails and process the orders. And then we had a partner fulfill them, drop ship them to the customers. And that was working really well. I'd come home, I'd reconcile the ads and revenue and so on. And that was going for a couple of months. And fast forward a bit, started to get a bunch of really nasty customer complaints like, this isn't what I bought, and you actually didn't ship me anything, and on and on. And it got to the point where clearly things were broken. And long story short, I realized that the partner I had partnered with was just like a crook. Like he literally stole some of the products, and it just didn't end well. But that was my first real lesson in entrepreneurship, which is the most important lesson is choose the right people to work with.
Mhm.
Like at the end of the day, everything you do in business is predicated on who you surround yourself with. And for me, I learned that you needed to just surround yourself with people of integrity that were hardworking and positive and optimistic. Said another way, I always wanted to be and still always want to be the dumbest person in the room,
Mhm.
because that means you're surrounding yourself with better people and are learning and growing. So anyway, that was first real company in high school, and then I went, which was in New Jersey, which is where I grew up and now live. Went to college in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, studied electrical and computer engineering, and that was pretty funny too because I graduated at a time when Wall Street was booming, and then we graduated it, and it collapsed.
Mhm.
Bear Stearns collapsed. I remember getting to college, and I'd have the conversation with friends like, "Hey, I'm Dan. What are you studying?" And literally every single one of them said finance, and I'm like, "This seems strange." And I
Mhm.
remember one friend in particular was like, "I'm studying finance because money is how the world works." And I remember thinking, kind of, but really technology is how the world works. So I'm going
Mhm.
to study engineering. Um, and so fast forward, the world blows up. Every single one of my friends, except for maybe one or two, left finance, and now they're all doing startups and technology and
Mhm.
media, et cetera. Because it's just, it's real business. Anyway, did that. Did another startup, online advertising. Then I did another startup, which we sold to ultimately Salesforce. Um,
Crazy. And everybody knows Salesforce
yeah,
too.
yeah, and maybe that's like an interesting segue into the influencer world. The first um, almost venture-backed company I started, software company, was this company called Spinback. We helped online brands and retailers measure how much money they were making from Facebook. It's like 2010. Every
Okay.
brand on earth wanted likes. No one knew
Yes.
what that meant.
Oh my gosh. And every single business, there was a little decal and it was a thumbs up and it said, like us on Facebook. And everyone had likes and there were all these subset groups and everything. So
That's right.
it was like the first version of influencing was
That's
Facebook
right.
likes.
And in fact, if you still walk around New York City, you could see those stickers still on some of these old bodegas and
Yeah.
coffee shops. But that was the product we built, and so we worked with all of the brands and retailers in the world. So companies like the OG D2C companies like Bonobos and Warby Parker, and then L'Oreal, Godiva Chocolate, QVC. And so we had an opportunity to work firsthand with amazing, amazing brands and retailers and really power what was then their social media monetization strategy and see what was working and what was not. And I remember one day in particular, we were working with QVC and we saw what we thought was our product completely breaking. And specifically, we saw like this huge revenue spike, and if you know QVC, it's a TV show basically,
Hmm.
and they see all their sales when people show up on TV and they talk about these amazing, much like what you do on Instagram. But
Right.
that's 24/7, 364 days a year minus Christmas. And I'm like, where is this revenue coming from? No one's on TV. And so we dug into it, and it turned out that like one person on their blog at the very bottom of some product detail page talked about this product that they loved, it changed their life, and it drove an insane amount of sales. And at that moment, I remember thinking, this is where the world is headed.
Hmm.
Like, gone are the days of big media publications or staunch or institutions being the only player to drive influence, but individuals now, due to the advent of the internet and social media, have just as much influence, if not more, than some of these bigger traditional companies. You're a perfect example. Like, look at what we're doing right here.
Yeah.
And so that stuck with me. And so we sold the company to Salesforce, and I took about a year and a half to try to figure out life. I was honestly, you would think I would, you would have thought I would be enjoying life, but I was actually a little bit depressed because
Hmm.
now what? And I spent about a year investing a little bit, wandering the desert, trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Love that.
And I remember reconnecting with all of my old customers and brands, pitching them effectively a new software idea. And one of them in particular was like, Dan, that's a really good idea, but can we get your thoughts on a strategic initiative that we have?
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, you're the third largest retailer in the world. I'd love to hear about your strategic initiative. And lo and behold, they realize, surprise, surprise, the world is changing. It's moving away from traditional media, television, radio, print, and to digital media and social media and influencer marketing. And they wanted to prove that they could launch brands digitally with what would mean to be unlimited shelf space compared to the
Hmm.
finite shelf space they have on television. And they're like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, that's a great idea. And I know your business pretty well. I know digital pretty well, but I don't know anything about beauty. But I know somebody that does. And so during that year, I was wandering the desert and trying to figure out life. I was working out of an office on 60th and Madison, a venture capital firm's office. And in that office, I became friendly with another person doing his own private equity investing. And he was able to do that and is able to do that because he was partners with Bobby Brown and helped launch Bobby Brown Cosmetics. So I got to hear his story about how he started Bobby Brown with 10 lipsticks and 10 SKUs and a small table. And he got to hear my story of how we worked with all these brands and helped them transform in social media. And we got lunch with a retailer, and several meetings later realized that, wow, we have a unique opportunity to launch our own digitally native beauty brand with a very motivated retailer. I'm like, you know what? Forget software. This seems quite interesting, and I'm going to try this. And so we went all in. Quickly, we both realized that we didn't know what beauty product we would make. Like, I'm not a beauty junkie, and certainly while he came out of beauty, isn't one either. And so we needed someone to help us figure this out and create products with real credibility and real authenticity. And so I was just pounding my head against the wall thinking about, how am I going to figure this part out? And I remember coming home and having this conversation with my wife and planted that seed with her. And then a couple weeks later, I get an email from her with like a video link. Just watch this. And I click the link, and lo and behold, it's a segment of Dr. Roshini Raj on one of these shows, Bethany Frankel or Dr. Oz or something. And I remember watching it thinking, oh my God, she is perfect. She
This
gets
is our
it.
woman.
She's amazing. I have to speak to her. So I sent her a cold email. Cold email became a phone call. I remember where I was outside the New York Times building, speaking to her on the phone. We hit it off right away. And a week later, we had her in for an in-person meeting. And probably a week after that, we were all kind of shaking hands, agreeing to go all on this together and figure it out. And a week later, I gave her homework, which is like, help us come up with a name. She came back with a list of maybe half a dozen names. Dr. Roshini Raj, forgot the others. And there it was, Tula. I'm like, this is interesting. What is Tula? Well, it's the Sanskrit word for balance on the inside and out, beauty on the inside and out. And she was a gastroenterologist, internal medicine, so that worked really well. So we picked Tula. We liked the name. Maybe the week or two after, we picked some packaging and colors and the Tula blue, and Tula was born, and the rest, they say, is history. But that's how Tula started.
That might be the best lead up that I could have ever asked for. I was not expecting all the details of that. I feel like you just answered so many of my questions, specifically kind of touching on the idea of, one of the things I had for you is you've had quite a few businesses along the way. You've learned a lot of things. Where have you been getting this information of like learning how to find a vendor and then learning how to set up a website and all of these factors that have helped you create your first business to then Tula?
Ultimately, it just comes down to, at least for me, and I think others that have done pretty well, just an intense appetite for information and just immense curiosity of like everything. I'll read a ton. I'll have many, many conversations with people in every industry. Just today, for example, I was meeting with somebody in the renewable energy space because I'm just fascinated about renewable energy and solar panel and fusion. And I just want to get smart on that space. I think it's a massive opportunity. And then as I texted you, I think yesterday, I was meeting with a friend who's an investor in the CPG and beauty space to catch up for obvious reasons. But
yeah.
But as I mentioned earlier, like I always want to, and in most cases am pretty dumb in these rooms, but that means it's because I'm learning from somebody else that is much smarter in their domain or thing I'm trying to learn from. And so for me, it's Google, it's the internet, it's reaching out to people, not being afraid to reach out to people and say, hey, do you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes for a call? I have some questions I'd love to pick your brain and get your thoughts on. Much like you're doing here. The only difference is you're filming it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey guys, you all get to listen to it.
Yeah.
Thankfully. If you guys missed me talking about this last week, I'm going to remind you because the Macys VIP sale started on March 24th, but you still have time because it ends on April 2nd. So you can get 30% off of all regular, sale, and clearance items, plus 15% off of all beauty items too. You guys have noticed that I have been slaying my makeup lately. I've been doing it a little bit differently, so I'll link all of the makeup products that I'm using right now on my Macys page at macys.com/FOW. And don't forget, shop the sale before you miss it. Another question I have is, so when I was talking to you in Dallas, I was just faced with this struggle of not knowing what direction to go. And it sounds like you are similar to me where you have all of these different interests, whether it's in beauty or CPG or engineering or your Salesforce, technology. What is your advice to anyone that is struggling with their career, just having, maybe different interests and just no idea what to do with their life or where to even start?
Yeah, well, so for the record, I have some idea, but I'm kind of back in that space. So and we'll touch on it, but I'm no longer at Salesforce. I'm a free agent again, and now I have the capacity to do kind of whatever I want. And I'm not really sure what that is. I have some ideas. I'm working on a few things, but I guess my point is I've kind of been here before, and I think what's worked for me are two things. The first is you just need patience. Like every time I've tried to force a thing that I needed to do because I was freaking out that I didn't know what to do with life, it always led to unnatural, inorganic, and kind of bad paths or results. But it's when I took a step back and was not afraid to be uncomfortable, in fact, got really comfortable being uncomfortable, and just let my passions kind of bubble to the top and chase those passions and whatever excited me and gave me energy. That is where and how I spend my time. Said another way, like I look at a lot of people in what look like great jobs to an outsider, and they're miserable. And if you're miserable at anything, you're never going to be great at anything. And so it's the instances where you find the most excitement, the most level of engagement. That is where you should lean in, even if it seems weird and strange and obscure. But it's a good chance you'll be probably really, really good at it because you want to spend your time there. It's kind of like the quoter saying, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. The first part is you need to figure out what of all your interests are, what rises to the top, and that just might take some time and patience to sort through.
And I think importantly as well with patience is that whatever that interest may be may also change in like 5 years,
It
10
will
years,
change.
1 year. Exactly. So when I was having this discussion with myself, my inner monologue, and I was hearing these things from you, I think it was just so reassuring to know that someone that is successful and has done all these incredible things in life also does still have these same feelings of me where it's like, what is the next step? Like, where do I go? And so I just think that it's a good reminder that you don't need to have like a clear path and just that patience. I've been trying to like lean into that myself. And lately I've felt a lot better direction, but that's also not possible without people like you that are giving me like the great advice.
Yeah, you don't need a clear path, and nor do you need a linear, logical career, right? When I started Tula, and I would tell my friends and family, I remember these conversations pretty vividly. So, Dan, are you going to get a job? I don't know. What are you doing? I think I have an idea. A week later, I know what I'm doing. What is it? I'm building. Can you imagine? Like I was in software and engineering. I was building computers when I was young. I said, I'm building a women's skincare company. And the response, ha 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 ha. Like, no, really, Dan, what are you doing? No, really, I'm building a skincare company. People thought it was a joke, actually thought it was a joke. Because I'm not a skincare guy or I'm not a beauty guy. But I would argue that because I didn't come out of beauty or skincare, I was able to look at it with fresh eyes and fresh perspective. And when you hear things and people say things like, well, that's not the way it's done, or the way it's always been done is, well, I didn't know that. And so I get to blow it up and start from scratch, coupled with things that worked and invent things along the way. And I think that's one of the reasons Tula worked out. Like in the earliest days of Tula, when I was running it full time, before this whole influencer thing became a big deal, from my last experience, I remember seeing how important social media was and some of these individuals. So I would handwrite notes and send lab samples out to tons of these mommy WordPress bloggers all over the world by hand because I'm like, these are my customers. And I did that over and over and over again. And then as we grew, we just institutionalized it a little bit more. And by the time we sold Tula, we had worked with probably over 4, 5, 6,000 influencer partnerships directly. But I was never a beauty guy before, and here
Mhm.
we are having a conversation with you about
About
beauty and
beauty.
entrepreneurship. And there was another quote I heard from the founder of Southwest Airline that always sticks with me, and the quote was something like, "The reason he was best suited to start Southwest Airlines is because he never had before, or he never came out of the airline industry before." So similar concept. He gets
Mhm.
to look at everything with fresh perspective, and in a way, although my partner did come out of beauty, I did not. So I got to apply fresh perspective, but also incorporate best practices from his years of experiences in the
Mhm.
industry.
I really love that take on fresh perspective instead of feeling lost. It's just like redirection, new motivation, something new to learn about instead of, like burying yourself in a hole and just feeling lost and just overwhelmed. So going into Tula and how it all started. So you had this idea to build this skincare brand. You have your co-founder at this point, and so you're looking for the face. And so that correct?
Well, we were looking for I wouldn't call
I-
her a face. We were looking for a real partner that could
yeah,
help us think through arguably the most important part of the
the
business, which is
products.
like, what are we making? And
Right.
like, look, the world didn't need, as we all know, the world doesn't need another skincare line or another, even though I'm started another beauty company with Dibs, like there is a lot out there. So if we were going to do this, it needed to be meaningful. It needed to be able to change people's lives for the
Mhm.
better, not just physically, but emotionally, and build confidence. And so it had to be real and genuine and authentic. And
Mhm.
so we needed somebody that, yes, had some media savvy, but was in the case of Dr. Raj, medical editor for Health Magazine on TV 3, 4 times a week, but like knew the science, knew the patients, and
Mhm.
that's really where she helped in a pretty big way.
So starting Tula, how many products did y'all start with?
We started with 4 products,
Mhm.
5 SKUs. So I think it was the cleanser, an eye serum, um, or eye cream, illuminating serum, and I forgot the last one, and then a discovery kit. So many versions of all those four.
Okay. And the whole premise behind Tula is that it's like clean skincare and the probiotic aspect of it as well.
Well, yeah.
Right.
So as I mentioned, Dr. Raj was a gastroenterologist. So she would see these patients and treat them and help them and diagnose them for internal medicine. You think about
Mhm.
gastroenterology, and we think about probiotics and yogurt, and it's good for our internal organs. And so I remember one meeting, she came in and she said, have you guys looked at probiotics? We're like, for what, your skin? She's like, yeah. We're like, that's strange. And what she observed with her patients was that the patients that were taking probiotics had the more glowing and radiant skin. So she implied that there might be a connection here. And so that was pretty interesting. And so we started to do homework. But actually, that same day, she also came in with a research report by the American Academy of Dermatology that showed probiotics that year to be a beauty breakthrough for skincare. And why is that? Well, we know probiotics are good for our internal organs. Did you know that skin is the largest organ on
Mhm.
your body? So it kind of makes sense when you think about it that way. And so we dug in and we saw a lot of research, new research around that supported that idea. And when we realized the science and data behind it, that got us really excited. And that's when
Mhm.
we decided to go all in on that concept. So probiotics and superfoods, clean, healthy, and it worked.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy. I mean, probiotics are such a huge part of like women's health now, I feel. I actually just started taking a pre, pro, and
yeah,
postbiotic. And the difference that I feel in my energy daily and like digestion and my skin and everything, it's made a huge difference. It's like, why did I not know about this sooner?
yeah, it's
So
great.
definitely love the idea. I mean, it's very unique. And exactly what you said is that if you're going to start something, it has to have a purpose and has to have a meaning to it. So you start with these first 4 products, these 5 SKUs, and at this point, are you online only? Where are you selling Tula?
We launched Tula, and for the first year, we were exclusive to QVC.com. We were their first
Mhm.
ever digital only launch of a brand. And as soon as that year expired, I was behind the scenes building our first direct to consumer e commerce site, Tula.com. And after in year 2, we launched Tula.com, and Dr. Raj started to make television appearances on QVC.
Hmm.
And we did that for maybe a year or two. And then shortly thereafter, or along the way, we launched with Ulta.
Hmm.
Um, and and then more recently, the past year or two, we launched with Sephora. And I should note that along that way, I also decided to fire myself as CEO
Okay.
and leave because I figured there were other people better than me suited to run a women's beauty company day to day. But um, that was our journey.
Hmm. So, as you're getting into retail, I think this is just very interesting for anyone with a startup. As you're growing rapidly and you have these, how does that work? Is Ulta reaching out to you and they're saying, hey, like, we keep hearing about your brand. We want to bring it in the store. Is this something that you guys were actively going out and you're trying to scale your business by getting into retail?
So in the case of Ulta, I think, and I'm pretty sure we were getting a lot of inbound interest from a bunch of retailers all over the world. I think Ulta included, and so we had a conversation with them. We had a preliminary meeting, and one meeting became another meeting, and lo and behold, we realized they could be a really great partner for us.
Hmm.
And as we knew we were heading into Ulta, we also knew that if we were going to do this, we needed to do it right. We would need a larger capital base to make the right investments in this rollout. And so, also around that time, we partnered with a private equity firm named L Catterton, L standing for L from LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy,
Hmm.
who are arguably one of the better, if not the best, consumer PE firm out there. And so they got it right away. They partnered with us, and we just got very methodical and very prepared for an Ulta launch.
Hmm.
And we launched, and I think within the first 12 to 18 months, we went from one of the newbie skincare companies quickly to the number one skincare brand in Ulta. And that was really, really exciting. But that took a lot of time and energy and investment, a lot of people, a lot of smarter people than me doing the
For
heavy
sure.
lifting.
I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. And speaking on that, one of my questions is during your time at Ulta, or sorry, not Ulta, at Tula, same letters. Um, what were some of your like greatest accomplishments?
So we've got good accomplishments. We also have probably the greatest failure column, which is maybe even
Yes,
more
that was going to be my next
yeah,
question.
but yeah, the greatest accomplishment I think first and foremost is the team that we built, right? Like we would not have gotten to where we did if not for just better people than me and amazing people building the business. So that by far is the thing I'm most proud of. Just a great group of people. And the second thing is the that got me really excited and in some cases pretty emotional. I remember in the early days not sure if these products would work and if people would like them, getting customer letters. And I remember there was one in particular from a woman who sent a letter, and the gist of the letter was like, I've had Crohn's disease forever. And in the past 2 years, I haven't been able to leave my house, and I've been debilitated, and my life has been incredibly horrible. And I started using your products, and I started to look good and feel better. And it was the first time in 2, 3 years I was able to leave my house.
Hmm.
And thank you. And so that was the first time I realized we were making a real impact on people's lives. There was another example of a daughter that wrote a note in. Her mother had passed away, and she was going through her mother's things, and she saw that her mother was using Tula products, and so she had a connection to her mother through Tula, and she started to use the products, and of course love them. And so like little moments like that, when
Hmm.
you realize you're affecting somebody's life at scale, in our case, because we were selling a lot of Tula, that was probably the second thing I'm most proud of. And then of course the most obvious one is selling and partnering with a company like Procter and Gamble, this incredibly iconic
Great.
American consumer products company, is really really cool.
Yeah. I'm excited to touch on that as well. I've
Yeah,
a ton of questions about,
yeah,
selling over. And I did want to mention the challenges as well, because without accomplishments, without challenges, there's no over.
yeah. There were two very specific moments in the earliest days of Tula where I thought we were going to die before we were ever even launched.
Hmm.
So the first was we were launching with a retailer. We had a specific date we had to be live by, and we had to have our products and components in the factory. And I remember we were getting our tubes for our cleanser, these plastic tubes. And if you ever, I'm sure many people listening have used beauty products with these plastic tubes, there's like a crimp on them. And the way that crimp works is there's a seal and there's a machine that heats the seal and it kind of glues it together. Well, we got 10,000 tubes and all of them, or rather, none of them had that seal. So it was
Oh.
impossible to fill it and close it. And because we could not do that, we did not have one of our SKUs that we needed to launch. If we did not have all the SKUs, we could not launch.
Mhm.
So I remember I went to the factory and I said, I'm not leaving here until we figure out how to crimp at least our initial order's worth.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, we can't do this. I'm like, you're going to show me how to use every single machine and every piece of equipment, and I'm not leaving until we do. And so they did. They took me through all the machinery, how that assembly line worked and how that fill worked and how those machines worked. And we got to the crimping machine and they showed me that there's a certain temperature that crimps these tubes. And I said, cool. Well, what happens if we make it a little bit hotter? Like, can we
Mhm.
actually melt this stuff together? Yeah, but it's going to damage the tube. It won't look as good. I said, I don't care. And so we started to slowly dial up the heat until we were able to literally melt the tube at the top to
Mhm.
hold the seal. Problem is, it only worked half the time. So then I was sitting on the assembly line for hours by hand, putting them in the good column or bucket and the bad. And I did that until we had enough to launch. And we launched, we hit our launch date, which brings me to my second, oh my God, we're dead moment. And that's when we launched on QVC on television for the first time. And so
Mhm.
me and my partner Ken and Dr. Raj, we all go down to QVC together. And Dr. Raj gets ready and she goes on camera in the studio. And me and Ken are sitting behind a computer watching the TV with her on air and also this computer screen that shows in real time call
Right.
volume and revenue. And we had an 8-minute segment. We had to hit some threshold to be successful or not in their eyes. And so the show goes on and I'm watching the graph and 1 minute goes by, no calls, no revenue. 2 minutes, a little bit, but nothing really. 3 minutes, same, four, five. We get all the way pretty much to the end of the segment and we haven't done anything. And I'm like, "Ugh, like this is a nightmare and a disaster.
Mhm.
And we'll chalk this up in the failed business column because I have plenty of those. And I said, I'm not going to look at the computer screen anymore. I'm going to enjoy the last 45 seconds and watch my co-founder on television talking about this thing we built. And as I'm watching it, my other co-founder, Ken, goes, Dan, look at the computer screen. And the charts just went through the roof.
Was it just glitching or what was going on at this
What do you think
point?
it was?
Um, Probably too many people are calling, and so you couldn't handle the call volume, or
So basically, what happened is no one was calling during the show because nobody had heard this story before. Everybody wanted
oh,
to,
they were just
yeah,
listening.
everyone wanted to see this thing called Tula by Dr. Raj. And so they were all just watching this new segment from this new brand. And then the end of the segment's over, and people go, okay, this is cool. Now I'm going to buy it. And
Mhm.
that's when sales took off. But those were really stressful 6 or 7 minutes for sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine, especially with your previous experience working with QVC, and you finally get this moment to launch this product,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Oh my god, what?"
Yeah.
So speaking of some of the failed businesses that you slightly mentioned, can you speak on some of those and, like, the lessons that those taught you?
Yeah. Where to begin? So I mentioned the first one in high school,
Mhm.
choose a business partner. Kind of related. I almost, or I did start a healthcare company, and this was to me exciting. It was in the cardiac space, basically, and I partnered with another successful entrepreneur, but doctor, and his son who came out of the healthcare space, and we were trying to build a business around congestive heart failure. Right, like talk about different interests.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, seriously.
and so I was building a company around helping patients with congestive heart failure. It's one of the most chronic illnesses out there. It's a huge strain on the healthcare system. And so I get a meeting set up with the CEO of this massive healthcare system in New Jersey. And so me and my co-founder and doctor, the expert in the field, we meet at the hospital and I've been preparing the whole week, and he's a much older guy and he gets to the hospital and I'm ready to engage in a prep conversation for the meeting we're about to have. And he goes, hey, what do you think about this piece of art that I just hung up on my wall? He'd taken up a big hobby in art collection. And I'm like, dude, we're about to go into this pretty big meeting. We should chat about this. And we go into the meeting, and it was clear that he was just not prepared,
Mhm.
didn't even think about this meeting for a minute. There were like 15 executives in this room. And I just remember thinking, we are not on the same page at
Right.
all. He doesn't need this. We're at a different stage in life. And I just realized at that point, back to people, it's not just that you need to work with complementary people with complementary skill sets. You need to be compatible in terms of interests and like work ethic and commitment, because you're really just signing up for a marriage. So that was quickly after that meeting. I'm like, this is not going anywhere. I put that to the side. I I started or almost started a cannabis company. New York made cannabis legal. They were going to issue 5 licenses, kind of like casino or liquor licenses. Each license you must have a cultivation center, aka like your garden basically, and then your dispensaries, which are like your retail stores. And so me and a buddy of mine that had success in that industry, we applied. We were one of 49 companies that applied, and we lost. I think we were like 15th or 16th. Silver lining being we were by far the cheapest in terms of how much money we invested, but we scored really well based on their point or score compared to how much money we put in. So I was like, all right, that was cool. So that was a failure. What else? I started another company in college called the campusatlas.com, which the gist was a student portal where you can get all of your drink specials, restaurant specials, professor ratings, weather, all of your logins for school email, like you name it.
Mhm.
We rolled out to 10 college campuses. And this was actually doing well, but I put it on hold to go do another startup that I thought had more upside. So anyway, like there's a huge bucket full of failed stuff, but you can't be afraid to fail, and that's how you learn.
Yeah, only just brings another
Yeah.
opportunity. So my last question that I wanted to ask you before getting into selling Tula to Procter and Gamble was, we mentioned some of the successes that you had career-wise, but I wanted to know during this time that you were focusing so heavily on your career and like building, what were some of the successes that you had in your personal life, and did you find it hard to separate, work from life and just enjoying life, literally?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, on the personal front, let's see, for Tula and Troops, I was married before I started these companies, but during both, I had 2 kids. So my daughter is now 3.5. My son's almost 16 months. So those are big wins.
Mhm.
The work life balance thing or lack thereof is real, right?
Yeah.
When you're building a startup or kind of doing what you're doing, you see how much time it takes. It's a lot of work,
Mhm.
not just time wise, but mentally, right? Like I would, being at dinner, be thinking about the things that are not working or are working, and it's just time consuming. But yeah, that was a win. Having 2 kids, during COVID hit, I moved in with my in-laws, which I thought would be for a week while we figured out where we go go next. But surprise, surprise, COVID crushed the world for 2 years. So I was there for 9 months, and that was silver lining because I got to build a better relationship with them, and also my kids. Like I work from home more than I ever had. Had it not been for COVID, I don't know that I would really have that great of a relationship with my kids because I'd be up before they get up and probably home after they go to sleep most of the time. But
Mhm.
now between calls, I can go pop in and say hi, whatever. So I would say big wins on the family front in that sense.
Yeah, good for you. Love
Yeah.
to hear that. Love to hear about it. You were telling me about your kids a little bit in Dallas. So I think it's really great to know that you've been able to kind of get closer with them through all
Yeah.
of this as well. So now talking about selling Tula.
Yep.
So this happened about a year ago.
Yeah.
How would you say that your life has changed in the past year?
So I'm now a beauty guy, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. So that's been a pretty big change in a good way. It's fun because it's a great industry with amazing people. And per the examples earlier, you can change someone's life in a really, really meaningful and intimate way. But, there's the obvious financial win, right? Like when you have an exit at that scale, there's a big win on the financial side of things. But really, all money does is give you freedom. And in my case, I've always taken the freedom upon myself to do what I want and
Mhm.
go chase my dreams. Um, but now there's a little bit more luxury around it. So that's been good. But honestly, aside from a little bit more freedom and being able to do cooler things, with a little bit of money, like I'm still doing what I'm doing. I'm still building
Mhm.
businesses. I'm still grinding in
Yeah.
a way, right? I'm working on another one with Courtney and Jeff at Dibs, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna probably do a whole lot more. But so in a way, a lot, but also not that much.
Mhm. When you sold Tula to Procter& and Gamble and you, like, finally reached this huge success point, right? Did you ever feel a sense of, like, "Okay, I'm, like, lost a little bit," because everything you poured your heart and all of your time and energy into is no longer yours?
Well, so remember, and I touch on this while I was building Tula, I ended up
Oh, 'cause you
stepping away day to day to
okay.
go start, like, as if one isn't enough, start a software company.
Oh my goodness, there's a software company in between Tula and
There's a software company during Tula. In fact, if for anyone that's been to the Tula offices would have seen this other company called Troops, which is a software firm. And so we had a beauty company working side by side, a software company, an enterprise
Mhm.
software company. But obviously, they overlap quite well. And so we sold Tula to P&G, but I still had my day job running this
Gotcha.
other software company called Troops, and that was also obviously very intense and stressful because there was a lot going on. We were effectively integrating these two other products called Slack and Salesforce. Salesforce had just bought Slack for $30 billion. They are a partner of ours. Ultimately, we ended up selling Troops to Salesforce a couple months later.
Okay.
But as soon as we sold Tula, like the next call I had was putting out some fires with my team at Troops. So I didn't get to just check out, go to the beach. I still
Right.
was running and working on another company.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this idea that it's like once you get your dream job or once you accomplish this, or once you do that, whatever, once you get there, then you'll be happy and then you'll feel like I can check out and I can do whatever I want. But it sounds like for you, I don't know if that'll ever be a thing because I think that you're always just interested in like what's the next.
Well, for me, it's the journey is the prize.
Mhm.
Like, imagine you knew exactly how your life would unfold. Like, that's not interesting. Or so you have a goal of making X amount of dollars or getting the Y job, and then you get it. Like, we've
Mhm.
all kind of gone through some version of this in life before. Many of us have, many not. But for those that have, so then you get there, and then it's like, well, now what? Right. And so I think uh, in a way, life really is about the journey. It's not about the end state. It's not about the outcome only. It is about the journey, and ultimately, if you're not having fun, like what's the point? If you're not happy, what's the point? So that's what I think about.
Well, that was a great, probably unintentional segue into my next question, which is we know each other through Dibs and ultimately Fun on Weekdays, which is my podcast. And my whole idea in life is that you can never really do anything that you want to achieve if you aren't setting aside time to have fun and enjoy every day, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, whatever. If you're just waiting every single week to reward yourself with a fun night on a Saturday, then you just like miss so much of life, you miss so much of the journey. So, you knowing me through this, how do you feel Fun on Weekdays kind of translates to your life?
So, like for me, work isn't work. It's fun. It's just fun because I get to meet cool people and have cool conversations like this. So that's fun in a sense. And I try to do the things that seem like a waste of time. Like I still play video games, right? Like I've been living in New York for years. I used to play the piano. I don't live in New York anymore. I have more space. I got a piano. I'm trying to play again. And then the obvious things: golf. I'm a big skier and snowboarder, although not doing that as much on the weekdays.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will do the things that I want to do, and that does include work, right? So
Mhm.
that's how I think about fun on weekdays.
Yeah, and having that healthy balance of work
Yeah,
and
for
fun.
sure.
So, last thing that I want to touch on, and then we'll wrap things up, is your current project right now working with Dibs. So, can you kind of share how that unfolded and how you decided to start building this brand with Courtney and Jeff?
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned earlier in building Tula, we were working with thousands of amazing people and influencers. And I remember, obviously, we'd look at who's doing well, who's not doing well. And there was one girl in particular that seemed to punch above her weight class early. Like I think when we started working with her, she maybe had 10,000 followers, maybe a little bit more, maybe 20. But she was converting well. Her content was great. She was just really engaged, and so we kept an eye on Courtney Shields, and we started to work together. And then it got to the point where we said, you know what, why don't we do a collaboration together? And I think she might have been the first collaboration we did. And so we built a product together, much like we're doing with you now at Dibs.
Hmm.
And she just crushed it. Like we launched it. It was one of the best days in sales ever at the business. And that just really, really stuck with me. And we kept building Tula. And as we were, after that collaboration or shortly thereafter, I remember catching up with her just to like check in and see what's up and what she's interested in. And she told me about the fact she was working on a jewelry line.
Hmm.
And she told me that she always wanted to start a beauty company, but she didn't know how. And I said, well, I know a thing or two about beauty. And at the time, I was introduced to their mutual friend, to our now Dibs CEO, Jeff Lee. Jeff was running A-Rod Corporation. So Alex Rodriguez, he had helped launch JLo Beauty. He went to law school with a friend of mine. And so we got connected because he was interested in potentially breaking into the beauty space in a bigger way, and specifically at Tula. But I knew we were selling to P&G, so there wasn't really an opportunity to work together there. But I just remembered thinking, Jeff is amazing.
Aha.
And I'd love to see if I could work with him again somehow. And so when Courtney said she wanted to do a beauty company, and I knew Jeff wanted to run and start a beauty company, I connected them and they hit it off right away.
Mhm.
And as soon as they had a few conversations that went really, really well, I was like, guys, like, let's do this. I'll back it. Ken will be in. We'll help you kind of incubate it and fund it. And that's how Dibs was born. And it's been, amazing because we're able to take a lot of what worked at Tula
Mhm.
and apply it here. But also, it's a different world we're living in now. So not everything that worked at Tula will work here. So back to fresh eyes and fresh perspective, we're just trying to think about things more holistically. For example, at Tula, yes, we did events. We never did events like the way we're doing them at Dibs now, and it's really
Mhm.
proving to work. So, back in the beauty game, I
Yeah.
guess, and so far so good.
Yeah.
And you know that because you're working with the team pretty closely.
Yes, yes. So, speaking of your experience working with influencers and bloggers and everything over at Tula, how do you view the beauty industry, kind of like the future of it, working with creators like myself?
Yeah. So I think that influencers today, if they do things right, which you are really not just quote influencers. You're an entrepreneur, right? Like you are in this example here. You're building a bit of a media company. You're working on other ambassador programs and partnerships with other brands. You're doing product collaborations, and I think, of course, everybody out there doing the influencer thing would love to have something like that on their own. But the reality is, not everybody can do that. And so I do think the future is one where influencers and creators will play a bigger role. I think people in this space like you will realize that it will be important and almost necessary to evolve beyond just being a quote unquote influencer and build real IP
Mhm.
and real partnerships with other brands and products. And so I think then the key to doing that is really finding the right people and partners to do that with, because
Mhm.
you know it looks like building a business like Tula or even Dibs is not easy either. There are a million and one moving pieces, but if you're able to kind of break through the noise and hustle and go find the right people and partners, then I think the future is one where the term influencer goes away and is replaced with what you already are, which is an entrepreneur.
Oh my gosh, I just got goosebumps. I'm like, "Ooh, I'm walking away from here feeling like I just got hyped up for the past hour." I love it.
Yeah.
So, one of the common things that you've said throughout this episode has been finding the right people. And as we wrap this episode up, I wanted to ask what other advice you'd like to leave my listeners with, knowing that a lot of my listeners are, kind of at this age where they're either on the cusp of graduating college or they might be in the similar boat as me, or even I mean, I don't know. I have listeners of all ages, so I really can't bucket them, but a lot of people just trying to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah, I've asked myself this question a slightly different way, and I've been asked this question, which is like, what would you give? What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah.
And I found myself thinking about that a lot over the years, and I think the answer would be to think bigger, meaning that when you're growing up, you are taught and conditioned by those around you, including your parents and your teachers. And as I mentioned earlier, you're on this societal treadmill. Get good grades, go to school, do your homework, get good grades, and then graduate and go to a good school. And it's very incremental, but like no one, I was fortunate, somebody I worked for put me in a situation where as a teenager, I was effectively building a business with him. Most people don't get that exposure to you can do anything. So in short, I would just encourage yourself to think that you can do anything. Like there's no limitation to what you can and cannot do. You just have to choose to believe that and choose to act on it. And most people, especially when they're younger, don't, because they feel like they haven't been allowed to, or they haven't been given permission yet, or they haven't graduated yet, or they haven't gotten the right job yet. But I think anything is possible, and you just have to believe it and go for it.
Thank you. I love that advice. One of
Yeah.
my favorite quotes from, well, I don't know if it's a quote, but one of my favorite sayings that I learned from my first job in college, they said, whatever your goal is, cross it out and double it, because whatever you think in your mind is achievable is like far too less of what you're capable of. So I think that's been something that has stuck with me. And I think, again, just exactly what you said, surrounding yourself with good people, which is what I'm doing here today. So thank you so much for joining me and being on the podcast. This is truly such a huge honor. And I know people are going to have so many great takeaways from this and hopefully leave this episode feeling very motivated.
Yeah, you got it. My pleasure. Great to see you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you guys next Tuesday.